Thank you for coming today. My name is Stacey Irwin. I am faculty member in the Department of Communication and Theater, and we welcome you to session 4 of the International Policy Conference. So what I'd like to do first is to start with a little bit of a bio. Our session is called Stories of Justice. As most of you already know, stories are a powerful way to shed light on issues both at home and outside the U.S. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Andrea Campbell, Natural Light Films, who will be sharing some of her stories of justice and some of the experiences around the making of her films. Andrea has presented her work at Sundance and won both an Emmy and a Gracie Allen Award for her film work. She has traveled the world but calls Lancaster home. Andrea holds a BS from Millersville University in the Broadcasting Option in the Department of Communication and Theater. She has experience in network, cable, and public television and received a 2004 Pennsylvania Council of the Arts Fellowship in 2004. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you.
Plug. So I really like the tagline on your website, an organic approach to storytelling through the hearts and voices of people at the root of each issue. So I was hoping you could start by talking a little bit about that philosophy.
Sure. An organic approach actually came from someone else describing my work, and I went, oh yeah, that's it. That's great. I'm going to use that. But really the goal is to have the individuals tell their story in their voice and to have me interrupt them as little as possible as the filmmaker. So it's empowering people with important stories to tell, or people, just everyday people that have stories to tell that can inform us and help us to understand everything better.
So
and also,
yeah,
Natural Light Films came from when I started the film company. I didn't have enough money for lights, so we always used natural light, a window, or whatever. But it also means just letting everything shine on its own for the most part.
So your goal is to connect with people personally through your media work. How do you try to achieve this goal? Like, is it the way you set up the shot, or you bring the person in or chat with them before you start rolling? How do you make that happen?
I would say just getting to know a person and finding out their story and finding out how their story might relate to a larger audience. It's the technology, basically you have to keep it from getting in the way. You can't be super concerned with the technology, or else then your attention can't be on the story and the person that you're talking to. So it's getting to a point where you're comfortable enough with the technology and with the people you're working with to really focus on the person that you're talking to and to make them comfortable, I would say.
So you mentioned technology, so that's the lead-in for the next question. What technology do you use when you shoot?
I've been doing this for probably close to 30 years now, so it has changed over the years. Right now we're using a small DSLR, the Panasonic GH4, which will shoot in 4K, but I'm still shooting in the 1080i format, which is still the right form for us for storytelling. It's an interesting, because it's always a progression. You have this look and this thing that you're used to with a particular camera, and then to have to make that jump every 3 years to whatever the next technology is, and to decide how do I best utilize the way this format looks. With the new technology, it's so much clearer and crisper, and it takes a while to get used to that look. And at first I didn't think it was flattering to people, and I wanted to shoot with the old camera because it was just a softer look. But now I'm getting to the point where I don't like that look anymore. So it constantly evolves with the audience. The technology evolves. The viewing audience evolves with what they're used to. It's almost like paintbrushes. If you want a particular look, you go back to an older format camera. If you want something to look like old VHS or film or a different type of look, then you go back to that for certain things. But right now, what most people are used to is the high-resolution HD imagery.
And on the flip side then, you've used different editing software through the years also.
I started with Final Cut Pro when it came out with my first home office workspace, and went with that all the way up through to the time when they switched to X, and then I transitioned into the Adobe suite of products, so using them for the graphics and editing and everything now. But every once in a while, I have to go back to the old computer, call up Final Cut Pro, and use that for editing particular things that were done 7 years ago or whatever.
So you still have that set up somewhere?
I archive my computers. There's different ages. So you have the computer from 7 years ago, you have the computer from 3 years ago, and you have the new computer, and you can archive that software so that when you need to go back to that point in time, it's there and available, because there are certain things that just cannot be accessed on a new computer anymore because of the formatting. Even QuickTime Pro doesn't, you can't really access some of the QuickTime movies on new computers these days. So it's tricky keeping up with all the codecs and all the formats and how things are going to play back on all of the different devices. Now everything has to not only play back on the computer, but the phone and the iPad and everything else. So there's a lot of technology involved in storytelling these days.
When I went to visit Andrea in her office, she had stacks of hard drives. So let's transition into what you're working on right now.
Okay. What I just finished yesterday was a piece, I think it was 2007, I started doing profiles of businesses that had won Ethics in Business Awards from a local company called, local organization called Samaritan Counseling Center. So through the years, we've been able to do profiles of nonprofit and for-profit corporations and individuals who have shown that they are exemplary in their ethics in business. And it's been just great to get to know all of these things and see all of these great examples. So one of the pieces we just finished was Assets, which is an organization in Lancaster that helps small businesses and individuals get started in business. They won the Small Business Award yesterday, so we did a film that profiles them. Do you want to see it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Assets is awesome. It's innovative.
Transformational the way overcoming them. Assets is a game changer.
We pursued Assets just because we knew that they were a small business incubator, and that's how we got involved with the learning circles.
Assets has a program called Measure What Matters, which is their effort to try to get and bring more new courses into Lancaster.
I have done their business management course.
The social enterprise pitch.
The Women's Business Center. Their learning circle classes.
Their micro loan.
My business has grown exponentially simply for being a part of Assets and one of their clients and part of this great community.
The mission of Assets is to go into the community and find those people who have tons and tons of potential and great ideas but might not have the resources. So I think that Assets is a liaison in helping those people reach their dreams and get to where they want to be.
If you look at Pennsylvania statewide, Lancaster is the most charitably generous county in the state. I mean, it's amazing. And it also has such a history and culture of small business. So when we think about putting those things together, we see a recipe for magic.
This event here today is the crowdfunding launch.
We are doing our pitch tonight, and it's live. So all those hours, late nights, it's all coming live tonight, and I'm so excited. Honestly, when we came into the program, we had no idea what a business plan actually entailed. We didn't know all of the work that it took. And so Assets, for 12 weeks straight, asked us questions, the hard things. What makes you worth it to do this business? How do you know you have what it takes? What are you going to sell? Is Is there a need for your business? Are you going to make money?
You know what Assets is really good at is definitely taking something so small and just really turning it into something special.
They challenge us, like, you guys can do more. You have more of a story in your business.
We have them list out every person, every entity that is affected by the business. That's their employees, that's their landlords, that's their own families, that's the neighborhood that they're in, that's their suppliers. And we have them analyze whether everyone who is touched by their business in any way is touched in a positive way.
Harvest Tobacco Company offers zero emissions delivery. It's really important to me to use quality and organic ingredients.
La aportación que recibí a través de Assets fue muy importante porque con ese monto de recursos con los cuales pude hacer la remodelación de la primera planta y a comprar algunos materiales gastables que me hacían falta para el negocio.
There's no better resource in the community for young and upcoming business leaders and for business leaders who have been around for a while and really want to enhance what they're doing on social impact-wise.
We've been in business for 29 years now, and we still find value in the kinds of things that Assets has done. E stands for Beneficial Corporation. They've helped to elevate our game in a different way.
First business that got a B Corp certification this year was the Stroopy Company.
Because we love making a great product, but we love even more being able to hire refugees that are moving to the Lancaster area in our company.
Measuring the things that are important, measuring your financial sustainability. We're also measuring things like what's your footprint that you're making on the environment? How are you maintaining your relationship with your employees? How are you doing things for the local economy and the local community?
Starting a business in Lancaster is a dream come true.
And it made me so excited to launch my business so that I can then give that same opportunity to other people.
The ability to do work and to advocate for integrating values in the business, I don't know that it gets any better than that. Because I think at our core, people want to have a sense of meaning and engagement in their lives. If most of what many people do day in and day out is spend a big chunk of time at work, big chunk of time doing business, how can we integrate our values into that experience so that it is more fulfilling for us, for our kids, for our communities? I think absolutely is getting better than that.
So that was the project that came out yesterday.
So at the very end, there was that nice music, and a lot of students wonder about where they can get music for their projects. Where do you go for your music?
There are lots of places online, premium beats, all kinds of places where you can just pay per piece for cut of music, and you can sample them and then use them, and it's anywhere from like $35 a cut sometimes, or what I have is a subscription to a music company that's online, GMP Musics. You pay them $200 a year and you can utilize any of the music that they have in their library, so you can just go on and download whatever you need. Or sometimes I have it composed. There are lots of really amazing musicians in Lancaster, and I've had a number of pieces composed for different work.
So transitioning a little bit, can you talk about Miss Liberty and your experiences producing that one?
Ms. Liberty was part of a series called People Who Must. When I was at I worked for WITF, the PBS station in Harrisburg, for 10 years. And I had been doing this program that was a ton of work. It was super fun. It was called Examine Your Zip Code. And it was basically anything that we found interesting, we would go out and do a story on, and it was a magazine show. So 5 different stories. But it was a ton of work. And it wasn't sustainable. And my boss called me and he said, "What would you like to do?" And I said, "I think I want to do this series called People Who Must, about people with a driving passion for a particular issue." And he said, "Go ahead." And so I met Linda Anthony, who is a woman who was disabled in a car accident and became an activist for people with disabilities. And working on that project, I spent probably at least 6 months with her, following her around, getting to know what she faced every day as someone in a wheelchair. And I can show you a quick clip and then tell you what the outcome of that relationship with her was, if you'd like.
I know that stands for Americans with Disabilities Act, but for me, it stands for some other things too. Attitude, dignity, and lastly, access.
President Bush's signing of the ADA has been called the most important civil rights legislation in the last 25 years.
People look at us at creation and not at, just occupying space.
Whether everything's successful or not, as long as you believe in yourself as a person with a disability and you believe that you have those equal rights, it will happen. Because nothing else could happen. You won't let it happen.
My name's Linda Anthony, and I'm the Executive Director, Steve Link Action. I'm the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Coalition of Citizens with Disabilities. We're a statewide advocacy organization.
You're working with a group of people who have been oppressed for thousands of years. So you're not only trying to change the attitudes of the public, general public, you're trying to change the attitudes of the people that you're even working with to make the change happen.
We are not handicapped. We are a person with a disability. Okay? Please always remember that.
I'm someone who comes from a very kind of, authority is authority. You do listen to authority. But I also am a child of the 60s and 70s, so there's this piece of me that just automatically rebels.
We want Great Houses to meet our demands. We have a list of 4 demands that simply starts with the fact that we don't want to purchase any more buses without lift. We're all members of ADAPT, Americans Disabled Incentive Programs, and there is a national move among our group to bring the buses into compliance.
ADAPT is the group that says this can't continue, that the injustices that are happening to people with disabilities is appalling, that it's inhumane, some of the things that are happening to our folks, and we can't forget that.
They have a program that helps people with disabilities, and they'll tell you that. They do have that kind of program, but they use their employees to carry people on the buses. They're carrying people on buses, like big buses.
We want them to know that we are serious about this, that we're not just out there doing protests because we're happy hippies.
I'll be at City Hall.
So that was a project that was really interesting because talking to Linda after that had aired on WITF, she was telling me stories about how she would be going down the street normally in her wheelchair and she would see people cross to the other side of the street because they didn't want to have to explain to their kids or to face her in the wheelchair. And she said after this film, people were doing the opposite. They would cross to the side of the street to talk to her because they were familiar with her. They were no longer afraid of her. They had a story. She said people she had no idea who they were coming up to her and talking to her like they knew her personally after seeing this film. And I think that's where I saw the power of stories and familiarity come into play. When you create that familiarity and you get rid of some of that fear or that unknowing that people have with someone who's different than them, then it opens those conversations. And I think that piece was kind of transitional for me, coming to that realization that it really is just about creating that familiarity and opening up conversations and finding similarities between people rather than differences.
Well, that's a great segue into your global work. So let's turn to some of your travels in Indonesia, India, Africa, and Central America. You did camera work for a documentary about disaster trauma in Indonesia. And so can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Sure. A friend of mine is a professor of theater and film at F&M, and for his sabbatical project, he was doing a project called The Tsunami's Wake. And it was 2 years after the tsunami hit India and Indonesia, and we were going back to see what some of the aid programs that MCC was incorporating into different villages and communities, how it was working. And it was a really great project because you saw how when they went into these communities, MCC, which is a Mennonite organization, was not only funding, it wasn't all Mennonite or Christian type organizations. They were funding Islamic organizations, anyone who was going into a fishing village or any town that had been decimated by the tsunami, and helping them rebuild community centers and basically giving them the materials to rebuild their own villages and towns. And it was just really nice to see the collaboration of the different communities, the different religions, and everyone working together to get the basics there so that each community could rebuild itself. And that was through Indonesia and India and into some rural villages. But yeah, that was a really great experience to see that collaboration.
Where did you sleep? I'm just curious.
Sometimes on the floor, in a hut, sometimes in hotels. It was kind of all over the place. A lot of, sometimes in houses. There was also just like youth hostel type places.
So you traveled to India also for your interviews for Naked Philosopher. Can you talk a little bit about where those interviews took you?
Sure. I've also found that you can't do everything for pay. You have to explore the things you're interested in and do things because you enjoy them. And Naked Philosopher was a project that a friend of mine who teaches yoga, she wanted to go to India and had been there I think once before. And I said, I'll go to India. And so we started doing research on this thing called the Mahakumbha Mela, which is the largest human gathering in the world, and it happens once every 7 years in different locations throughout India. And we thought, we'll do a documentary on this. So this will be the research trip. So we went to India for, I think it was probably about 6 weeks, and traveled around northern India, and we took the camera and we filmed things, and we just interviewed people that we ran into. We found a professor at the university wandering around the university one day and sat him down in the quad and interviewed him, and he was this incredible, he had all of this knowledge about world religions and all of these really interesting things. We found this gentleman selling peanuts on the river, on the Ganges River in Rishikesh, and just sat down and started talking to him. So I think one of the things that's great lesson for anyone is to just talk to people, listen to them, get their stories. You don't have to have a camera, but for me it's been an amazingly great excuse to talk to people. Do you want to see Shankar?
Yeah.
My name is Shankar. I'm eastern part of India. I'm from Calcutta. And I sell peanuts to survive myself.
For part of his life, Shankar traveled throughout India as a Hindu holy man, a sadhu without possessions. After becoming disenchanted with religion, he settled on the banks of the Ganges, near the city of Rishikesh, to find peace.
Actually, I devoted my life to find out the truth. I visited many institutions and then many Sadgurus, but neither the institution nor any Sadguru could satisfy me. And by looking at their behavior, their manners, I said, this is all bogus, this is not the true thing. What I want to find out in the world is the true name.
There are many sadhus, gurus, and self-proclaimed holy men living in and traveling around India. Many of them rely on the charity of strangers. Many of them are not holy.
This particular place I chose to achieve peace, nothing else. It is river bank of Ganga. Since our last 7 years I have been sitting. I used to have this before, but I don't do it now. I used to have before. It is very easy to change a dress, but it is not possible for a man to change himself so soon. It takes time. It takes time. But to change the clothes, it does not take time. Now look. Now tell me, do I look like a sadhu or not? Now you can record my everything, but you cannot see what is inside here. No. What idea, what philosophy I am carrying here. It is invisible thing. In Indian language is that the man who is free from all evil is called a saint or a sadhu. So if that is up to the world to judge me whether I am free from all this or not. My student, my loving one. It is a time, but in scientific age, we must not believe any particular religion or any party. It should be only one religion, that is humanity. That's all. My religion is humanity. My caste is humanity. My nationality is humanity.
So anybody could have talked to Shankar and he would have said the same thing to you, whether you had a camera or not. It's just since I had the camera, I'm able to share it with other people.
In Village Stories, you profile artisans creating fair trade products for 10,000 villages, and you filmed in West Africa and East Africa. So that project was both close to home and global. How did this collaboration and your work there come about?
A friend of mine worked for 10,000 villages, and I had decided that my next trip needed to be to Africa for some reason. It just was, I wanted to go to Africa for the next trip. And I just started saying that, and within a year, I had 3 different projects that people were saying they had to do in Africa, and the one that got funded was through 10,000 villages. So I wound up going to East Africa with one of the representatives from East Africa and profiling people and artisans who were making products for them there. And then I flew across the country and met my friend who was in the West Africa, and we did, I think it was 6 countries in 4 weeks and 12 different stories with artisans. So it's a pretty crazy schedule, but really interesting, all of the different stories and how fair trade is helping in these communities. And it's not just about fair trade, it's about different issues. One was in Ethiopia, where they had to use coffee beans because they didn't really have access to anything else, and it was a community of people who came to gather around this one church, and they all had HIV, and they were drawn to this one church because of that. And then 10,000 Villages found there was a need there for people to be able to support themselves, and they were highly discriminated against, and they formed this community of people making these coffee bean necklaces and jewelry, and it was so empowering for this community to have support and to be able to go back to their families. So some people started to be able to go back to their families and talk, but still a safe place for people who were dealing with HIV at the time. One of the projects, I don't know, if you get tired of seeing things, let me know, but one of the projects that we did there that I thought I hadn't actually looked at in a long time until Stacey brought up doing this. And the international justice thing, I started thinking about one of the pieces that we did that was for LEAP, which is a program that Mennonite Central Committee started in Africa with someone from Africa, Michael Machua, who's an artist, and it had to deal with poverty. And I can show you that, and that basic is kind of a philosophy about how to deal with issues like poverty.
So when we arrived in Congo, we were asked to work with artisans to help them mostly to export. As we got to know the artisans, we realized that a lot of the poverty that they were facing, although it had been caused in the past by a lot of political instability, war, and all these things, it had become a way of thinking, like a prison for their minds, where it became very difficult for them to see other possibilities outside of what they've known and outside of what they've lived. And so we saw that the first step to helping them move forward in their life wasn't to teach them skills, teach them business skills, or teach them how to do accounting or design or all those things, but was really to help them break those bonds that were in their thinking. And so to do that, we created a program that became what's called LEAP, Life Evaluation and Investment Program.
LEAP generally focuses largely on producer groups and producer individuals. So you find artisans who have their own businesses or who carve or work for others, or fair trade groups, for example, like Mombolu that are working in workshops, and the people who've been marginalized.
This training came such an opportune time when we actually needed training that was going to cause a paradigm shift in the minds of the workers and in the minds of the managers. When we did evaluation at the end of the year, we saw what it did. The workers have also improved. They are thinking of what else can I do outside from Honolulu.
In Maasai culture, the Maasai women are not allowed to own things. They don't own land, they don't own cattle. And so we were sitting with a group of ladies, Namayana, who is an association of women, and we were sitting in their office and doing the training with them. And as Mike was trying to explore their world, they said, no, we can't own things, and they felt so limited in that. So Mike just, calmly asked them, he said, well, where are we right now? And they said, well, this is Namayana's office, this is Namayana's land. They said, well, who is Namayana? And then you saw this spark in their eyes, and they realized we are Namayana, and this is our land. And from that, it created a change in their thinking. All of a sudden, all these possibilities opened in front of them. And then Namayana began to look as a group at how they can now buy land together, buy cattle together, so that despite the political difficulties they have, they'll be able to own land and own cattle. So it's one small example of how we can change the way people think and give them a new vision for what's possible for them.
It was like a wake up. there are so many things that we know, but we also need to be reminded sometimes. And when we went to the training, it was a 3-day training, and we learned a lot of things.
The key to the success of LEAP is to find someone, to find a trainer that has that spark. In Kenya, we met with Michael Chilwa, who himself is an artisan. He's worked with paper, he's worked with furniture, he's done several things. He's also very, very intelligent, and his intelligence is grounded. So he's able to interact with the poorest of the poor, with people who are illiterate, with people who have had no education.
In Africa, with so much pressure, so much financial pressure, so much stress, and with a collapse of the extended family system, and with diseases like AIDS coming in, a lot of people have forgotten the ways when they really used to enjoy what is called life, and are drifting through life. And once in a while, when you have a program like this, that gets them to stop and begin to dream, reflect, and begin to break some of the limitations and challenge some of the ideas they have about themselves, then they begin to grow. Wakati nilikuja hapa kwa hiyo semina ya LEAP,
what he's saying is before he used to drink, but after he got to the training, although he had been preached by very many people, that made him stop drinking without any pastor coming to preach to him. And that has really changed his life because he's able to plan in the morning what he's able to do.
British is a mine owner in the TC area. He's very visible in the community, but he was an alcoholic. Every day you would see him, completely drunk. And it was sad because he had this source of revenue, but he was never able to turn that revenue into a different life for himself and for his family. Through the LEAP training, he decided to stop drinking. And he really did. I also barely believed it. And people around barely believed it. They said, no, it's not true. But then we saw this change. Talking to someone, seeing that clarity of thought, and now managing his mind more responsibly, and seeing that he has vision for the future, and vision for his children, vision for his family. I mean, it's something that is so exciting. It's difficult to describe.
LEAP technically is about getting people to fulfill their dreams. Because we live in a continent, Africa, that is so dynamic and has so many resources, that there's so much poverty around. And we see so many opportunities pass people by. LEAP is actually getting people to discover themselves again, to learn to dream, get the dreams that they have forgotten when they were young, when they were 8, 10 years old, and believe that they can be whatever they want to be.
In poverty, often people see themselves as being passive, as being completely subject to their environment. And if you can just help someone to see that, they are active participants in their lives, and they are active agents in their environment, that they have the power to change things around them, then you have the beginning of something. And slowly now they start to see the potential for what they can do to make their life better.
So next we want to show a trailer in a couple minutes of Children in a Jar. And can you tell a little bit about the process of shooting this film on location in Central America before we show the clip?
Sure. Children in a Jar is a film that was shot back in 2000. I had just left WITF to start working all freelance and start my own company, Natural Light Films. And someone I know here in Lancaster had been down to Central America a number of times, and he had seen the situation with the homeless children there, and he said, can we do anything about this? And I said, well, I don't know, I haven't seen it. So he took me to Latin America, and I went out onto the street with some of the street educators and met some of the homeless kids and saw the situation, and I said, yes, I think we can do something. So we started a process of making a film about the homeless children in Latin America and the problem that they had with sniffing glue. The process was that I went down there and I lived in the homeless shelter with the kids that were in transition off the street for a couple of weeks. Then I brought in a cameraman and a couple of local film crews. My cameraman was from New York, and he spoke Spanish, French, English, and Mandarin, which was a huge, well, we didn't need the Mandarin, but everything else was a big advantage. And then we had a crew from Nicaragua, from Managua, where we started the filming process. And that worked out really well. And then we went to Honduras and took the same crew, and I wound up going a couple weeks ahead of time and living in Honduras, in Tegucigalpa, going out on the streets with the street educators and learning what was going on there. And basically, what I was doing the whole period where the crew wasn't there was going out and getting to know the people that were there and finding out who we should be talking to, who can tell this story best, and who can people relate to. And I think that's probably good enough, right?
Well, one of the stories you told in one of my classes a few years ago is that you couldn't take anything in your pockets. You couldn't take anything with you because they would pickpocket everything on your body.
Yeah, you just had to go out with nothing, because everything, and a lot of places besides here, the personal space issues are much different in a lot of other countries, and so you have to get used to that. And it's just, in India especially, there is not nearly as much personal space, but with the kids, they were all over you, and their hands were in your pockets, and they took my cameraman's wedding ring. He got it back, but it's just, you just have to be prepared to be all out there for the most part.
I remember you saying that the zippers inside his vest had been unzipped. Or,
everything, yeah.
So that's an interesting situation.
When you're in, you're in.
Yeah. There you go. You're always in, I can tell. All right, so yeah, let's have a look.
Life on the street and death on the street in Central America it's tough.
Richest is getting richer, and the poor are getting poorer.
Where in Honduras we have social cleansing, which is another facade for the murder of children.
By getting rid of rubbish that are on the street. The economic problems create all the family mistreatment. It's like generation after generation, you are like carrying the problem.
These are kids who could have made it.
More than 50% of the population is younger than 16. Have not the educational opportunity.
Maybe they say if they heard about something at 8 years old is killed, they say, oh, what horror, or something like that.
These are children. These are children who, like our own children, feel rejection.
They also go into prostitution. That's a big danger. One of the major threats that they have.
Around 85-90% of children living on the streets are addicted to glue or regular.
Just as a matter of survival.
I believe that even if we change only one, just one, it's worth all the effort and all the money. Saving one life.
Bueno, estas son las fotografías de algunos, no todos, son unos pocos niños de los que han sido asesinados aquí en Honduras. En Honduras, al igual que en otros países de América Latina, el asesinato de niños de la calle y de jóvenes de la calle es muy común. Nosotros tenemos documentados cientos de casos aquí en Honduras de menores asesinados en los últimos 3 años solo. Y estamos pensando que es un caso de limpieza social.
Between January 1998 and May the year 2003, 1,726 children and youth under the age of 23 have been murdered. 61% of the cases have not been investigated adequately to be able to identify the killer or killers. And of the 39% of the cases where the perpetrator has been identified, not prosecuted, but identified, fully 1/3 of those murders were committed by the police.
Sí, yo me María José, en mi nombre Altamirano, y mi tengo 12 años. Tengo 13. Y yo estaba en el parque, todos los parques. ¿Qué parque? Porque mi mamá se metió con un hombre y entonces mi papá mucho tomaba. Y cuando tomaba, se portaba mal, pues me pegaba. Entonces, como yo no podía, entonces yo me lo pedí de la casa. Y no le quedé. Tengo 7 hermanos, pero solo 4 están en la casa y 3 andamos en la calle. Olvido que en el confesor.
Glue here, which is the solvent-based glue, a very toxic form of glue. You can rarely find it in Europe or North America now because it's so toxic and so flammable. Sometimes they put it in a baby food jar or a plastic bag or a juice container. And the kids will put it up to their face and they will exhale the warm, moist air from their lungs. It mixes with the solvents in the glue and then they inhale it. And it's very toxic. We've had kids whose central nervous system has been paralyzed and they just drop dead. When the Casa Alianza street educators go out onto the street, they find kids who are really in a difficult situation. These kids have a lot of hope and we're trying to do whatever we can to save them.
Yo me voy a bañar después que me baño, vengo hoy ponen una cosa y la echaba aquí ahí porque la gente no me pone le dio más al agua todo yo lo lavo y después cuando llegue le voy a comprar té ahí y me voy a un té y todo el día va volviendo que no me conoce nada de agua y vivo en la perra. Una vez que estaba en el parque yo le digo, vea, yo me iba a comprar una propuesta. Entonces vino el chaval gordo de los sitios ese pues chaval yo iba caminando, pero nos estamos dando encerrar, nos terminan en el suelo y yo andaba la camisa y me la rompió todita, pero como andaba un camisa bien por dentro, me lo quería quitar, salí corriendo y un CPF. Y dice, deja la muchachita, que no me dejó guardar allá. O sea, dice que no me decide, pero estaba con una de mis hermanos que me quería dar la puerta. Yo quiero dejar la fe, pero no sé, yo digo, yo ya no voy a seguir volviendo, yo no vuelvo ya. Pero el ratito me da ganas de volar, pero ya más. Yo quiero más fe. Y quiero más. Sí. A mí me gusta ser doctora, doctora. O también secretaria, ¿no? Sí, yo quiero irme a un centro que van a ver, que me quiero ir para no estar problema que en el sol.
So what do you say after that, huh?
That was a really hard project. And I think that, again, every single project you learn a lot and you just stay open to what people need or want to tell you, and you give them a larger audience and a voice. I had a lot of people who had seen this call me and say, what can I do? And that was the big flaw. Well, what was considered the flaw with this piece is I didn't have an answer. I didn't know what to do about it. And that's why it wound up in a lot of festivals, but the broadcasters didn't want it because it did wind up airing on WHYY in Philly, but people want an answer. What are we going to do about this? And I didn't have an answer at the end of this program, which was really hard. And so I'm just throwing it out there, basically, and hoping that someone who knows more has an answer. And that's what I think I've been doing with the film work ever since. It's just, I came back from that completely changed from that experience. I realized what a consumer culture we have here. And it's like, for years, I did not want to buy anything after I got back from that trip. But I think it's just, I didn't make a plan to tell these sort of stories. It wasn't like I'm going to go out and I'm going to be an activist and I'm going to change lives and I'm going to do these stories. They just happened, and they just keep happening, and that's what I keep doing. So we'll see where it goes.
So we did want to take a few minutes and entertain questions for Andrea. So does anybody have a question about the process? Yeah, please.
I just had a question real quick.
Can you stand up?
Yeah.
Thanks.
After, watching all these trailers and watching where you've been in India, Africa, Nicaragua, all across the world, it really is great to just how a simple, something I'm just trying to get into broadcasting myself, and something so simple can take you to everywhere you could possibly want to go. And I was just wondering, after going to all these places, where do you want to go to next?
I'm trying to decide that. It's interesting because it'll be travel for a little bit, and you'll go places a couple of years, you'll do things, and then I'll want to focus here in Lancaster. And for the last couple of years, we've been focusing on projects here in Lancaster. We just did a piece called My Lancaster, which was all about why this place is cool. And it let people from Lancaster just talk about why they love this place. And that was something that I'd wanted to do for a while, and that was really fun. Did a whole piece on agriculture in Lancaster County, which is another thing that I'm really interested in for some reason. I was watching this piece and thinking, wow, I wonder if that's why I've got this obsession with food culture now. But so now I'm wind up doing a thing about agriculture in Lancaster County. It's all, there's a piece on Lancaster Central Market that will be in the local film festival on October 20th through 22nd here in Lancaster. So it varies. It's like, okay, I want to focus on this area now. Wait and see what happens. Start thinking about where I might want to go next, and just basically keeping your eyes open and seeing those opportunities and going for them when they're offered. And I would say the India project didn't have any funding. That was just us taking 6 weeks off from work and going. The Africa piece, the Children in a Jar piece, it had initial funding to get it shot, but then I worked on that for 3 years without any funding. That was one of the side projects. So you have to balance it out. What pays the bills and what you really want to do, and I got lucky. What pays the bills is really interesting, as well as the stuff that I want to do, and it allows me to mix those sorts of things up.
Other question? Yeah. Oh, in the back. Yeah, Ryan.
Have you ever had a shot or an interview of some sort where you really liked it, but you had to leave it on the editing floor, under on the cutting floor? So has that happened to you? Is once a project, twice a project, or ever happened before?
For what? I'm trying to think of a reason why you would have to leave it on the floor.
I remember something I was told in high school, the phrase, some puppies must die. And that if you have something that you really enjoyed making, or if you saw it come together, it worked really well, but you had to cut it for the benefit of the whole project in general. Has that ever happened to you?
Oh, there's always cuts. It's, you can make when you make a piece, the first cut is often twice, 3 times as long as you want the final piece. I've been lucky in that most of the pieces that I do, I'm working towards a particular goal, but it doesn't have to be that. I'm just working on one right now that was supposed to be 8, it's going to be 15. And they're okay with it because it works in that length. But I think that it's good to keep cutting. And when you see something and you work on it and you work on it, work on it, let it set a little bit, work on it, and then you just keep pulling things out that don't really need to be there. You may be in love with this little statement, but does it really need to be in there? Or is it just lengthening out the program? I've seen a lot of films that were made, and they were made to be feature length. So they were an hour and 10 or an hour and 20 minutes long, and they really should have been 40 minutes long. It's just, why is all that stuff in there? If you can condense it down, especially with the way people are viewing things now online, the shorter you can make it, the better. If you have more time, you can make it shorter. I think Ben Franklin wrote a letter one time that said something about, sorry for the length of this letter. If I'd have had more time, it'd have been, if I'd have had 2 weeks, it'd have been shorter. If I'd have had 2 months, it'd have been a lot shorter. It's just that crafting and making things down to its essence, I think, is important.
What advice can you give for students that might be thinking about starting their own operation, things that you learned, maybe something that you wish you had known before you started?
I think the biggest learning thing is to the hardest thing to do is to figure out exactly how much money you need to make to survive and how much work you can do and what you need to charge for that work. And that comes with time. I would say it took me at least probably 5 years of struggling pretty well before I figured out what my rate really needed to be to sustain the business. And so that's the hardest part. I think the other thing is just being there and being available and being happy to do things. I mean, enjoying what you're doing and getting out and doing it. And if it appears to be a struggle, or if it appears to be like that you're not enjoying what you're doing, if you aren't enjoying what you're doing, then it's going to show and it's going to hurt your business.
Other questions?
I have one more, if it's okay. How much, when you have somebody compose something for you, how much does that usually go for? How much do you usually spend?
It varies.
It varies.
Yeah, I mean.
Can you give me a high-low?
It's depends. Like, you're going to have a piano, or you're going to have a 4-piece music. Are you going to buy a piece that's already partially composed and have them alter it? It's really all over the map. I was trying to think. I just had an amazing experience with an artist who came in. I gave her the film and said, I need music for this section, and this section. We played it back for her, and she would just start, finish. And it was like, oh my God, that's it. That's exactly what we need. So you can have all these really great experiences. You can make it as easy or as difficult. Recording studio with all the different instrumentation, it's hard to say whether it's going to take an hour or whether it's going to take days. And I think that's one of the important things with music, art, any type of art, is that she did this in a couple of hours, but I think it's better to pay like a fee for the music rather than that, because it would have taken someone else days and days to do that. So you can't just pay on an hourly basis, I think, for creative arts. A lot of times it has to do with what the budget is too. If you say, this is what I've got available for this, often a musician will say, I'll do that for that.
Any final words or advice from you?
I think you just have to really enjoy what you do and get, and I think that also one of the important things is to realize that there's always a deeper story. There's always more to it, that you can't just look at, I mean, you always do. We're human, we do that. We look at someone, we see an appearance, we make a judgment, and that's just because that's how we're made. But I think the great thing is to always realize that there's a deeper story, there's something more there, and that you can actually ask and find out what it is.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.